And breaking tonight, President Trump just declaring that the U.S. will not be going into Syria. In fact, here's a preview of his interview with our very own Maria Bartiromo.
We're not going into Syria. But when I see people using horrible, horrible chemical weapons, which they agreed not to use under the Obama administration, but they violated it.
They said they got rid of them.
Hey, look, what I did should have been done by the Obama administration a long time before I did it. And you would have had a much better, I think Syria would be a lot better off right now than it has been.
Well, you can catch the full interview tomorrow on Mornings with Maria. Joining me now, former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth, Rich Lowry, and Tammy Bruce. All right, Tammy, let me start with you. No boots on the ground. Okay, we got that part. But there has been a major shift with respect to President Trump's approach to at least Syria and Assad. Rex Tillerson, who on Sunday was sort of saying, hey, you know, we don't really care that much about regime change. Today, after this G7 meeting, and as he went into Moscow, saying Assad must go.
Yeah, and Nikki Haley was the first sign of that as she was indicating the administration's position. This is a sign of leadership. I mean, you can have a principle base of what's important to you, and then when things change on the ground, you're going to adapt to that. That's what's required here. It's like if you bought a house and you said you weren't going to do renovations, and then the kitchen is on fire. Of course you're going to do renovations. So it takes an ability to understand what's important. He's been listening to the generals, which he's been lauded for. This is certainly a measured dynamic, a calm dynamic. So he's showing, I think, the range of what's required in a situation that's dynamic and fluid.
Nan, it is dynamic, it is fluid, and it's been measured thus far. But the analogy I would use is buying a bag of cookies and saying to myself, I'm only going to have one. Right. Then I have cookie creep. Okay? Right. We're worried about mission creep right now because I don't know that any president really realistically thinks that any of these things will blow up to the degree that they are. You're starting with Vietnam, coming all the way forward. So how does President Trump make sure that this does not become a quagmire?
Well, I think actually, Rich, National Review had a great piece by Conrad Black, who said, look, this is now the end. The president has signaled the end of an era of delusional altruism and deliberate weakness. And apropos of the minefield you talked about, President Trump is walking into an enormous minefield in international affairs that has been left to him by President Obama. The reason he had to intervene in Syria as he did is because the Obama administration did not eliminate the chemical weapons, did not actually eliminate the red line. And the president is going to have to be highly adaptive as these situations proceed, because a lot more trouble is going to unfold. And that's why it's so important for him to proceed with his domestic agenda and strengthen us as a nation and strengthen our economy so that we can afford to deal with these challenges.
I mean, no one thought that foreign policy would be as prominent in the news at this particular stage, I don't think, just a couple of weeks ago. But here we are, North Korea on the brink, Syria on the brink, and Tillerson in Moscow with making demands of Russia to stop their backing of Assad. What happens if they don't?
With very tough words and true words. And, Charles, I think it's just extraordinary that the administration that supposedly colluded with Russia on its way into office is immediately, almost right out of the box, more hard-headed and realistic about Russia than the Obama administration was for 8 years. Now, obviously, we don't get in a shooting war with Russia in Syria or anywhere else, but we do want to establish leverage. We want to establish our deterrence and work on a long-term plan to pressure Assad such as that eventually you can get a diplomatic settlement worthy of that country.
Assad, though, you know, Arab Springs came and went. He's one of the last guys standing. And again, you have to wonder, because whatever deal we cut with Russia, we'll have to include them keeping naval bases with that Mediterranean access. You wonder what role Iran is going to play in this. And I do wonder, again, understanding that what motivated President Trump were those scenes. We're still going to have women, children being slaughtered in that country by Assad until he is forced to stop. And if Russia doesn't stop him, that's where I'm worried.
Well, you know, while President Trump is relooking at a scene that's changing frantically each day, so are the Russians, because they had, you know, Iran. Assad is the client of Iran. You had a triumvirate there. You figured America was out of the Middle East. This was a door open for them to sweep into the Middle East. Russia, it's their only warm water port. It was like all good, right? It was all good. And suddenly Mothra shows up. and everything is different. So the problem is with Russia, which is a weaker state. They really can't confront us. They thought this was an easy push, but now it has changed. So it comes down to really, what does Donald Trump want? What does General Mattis want? Nikki Haley, who is, of course, the breakout star, is she going to really also then start moving into some kind of policy dynamic about what is appropriate? But this is where leadership, the conventional wisdom of the West, where it comes through, Europe, its condition, a refugee stream that is weaponized. All of these things have to be dealt with. The good news is Donald Trump has surrounded himself with generals who know what they're doing.
And to that point, and by the way, speaking of Nikki Haley, she was also the first in this administration that I can recall who was taking a hard line against Vladimir Putin almost out the gate. I mean, so, you know, there was a bromance going on. She was never a part of that whole agenda. No, but we are looking at a situation, though, that you have to figure over the next perhaps 30 days or so, something will come to a head there. Is it possible that Russia says, hey, we can have everything we want there? Because I don't buy into reports that they knew about the chemical weapons part of this. I think they were shocked because, to Tammy's point, no one was paying attention. It could have been business as usual. All of a sudden, you throw these chemical weapons into the dynamic. Either Assad is truly drunk and crazy on power, or they really thought that there were no limits, that the West would not pay attention. The West is paying attention, and perhaps Russia can have everything that it wants by just simply helping us get rid of Assad.
I think the key is going to be for the Trump administration that when they say something is going to happen, it will happen, which is the key distinction between its antecedent and this administration. And I'm glad, Charles, that we have Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State as the counterpart to Nikki Haley in the UN, because both of them are people of resolute distinction. And in Rex Tillerson's case, he's dealt with Putin. He knows how to manage the nuances of his
That's a genius appointment there, because
personality. Exactly. So that we can get the kind of result with a minimum of force, with a minimum of, as one of the Russian generals, I think it was, says, with a minimum of kinetic encounter risk.